And so like
Hmm.
eventually where you're going to end up is with FedCoin, and everybody's going to have a FedCoin wallet on their phone. And that's not going to be a crypto you can speculate on. That's going to be a closed loop quantum machine that's housed like somewhere that the Fed controls. And it's going to have the serial number of every Fed coin in existence. And I'm going to know exactly what you did last weekend, where you did it.
Capitalism is under attack. Socialism is more popular with young people in America than it ever has been. A lot of people think this is a political choice, but it's really about economic systems. So, is capitalism over or is it just evolving? And what does that mean for investors? Hello and welcome to Milk Road Macro, the podcast that did not have a Trump Zoran bromance on our bingo cards, but they are now our new favorite celebrity couple. I'm your host, John Gillen. Today is Wednesday, December 3rd, and we are joined today by E.B. Tucker. EB is a veteran investment analyst, author, and the editor of the Tucker Letter, where he provides insights into complex financial markets and macroeconomic analysis. EB is going to share a ton of great insight. This is going to be a very interesting conversation, wide-ranging, full of alpha. So if that sounds good to you, make sure you like and subscribe. Share this episode with someone who's going to enjoy it. And as a reminder, before we get into the episode, if you are already investing in AI or want to get invested in AI, you need to check out our new Milk Road AI letter. It's free, comes out every Wednesday and Friday, helps you keep on top of the markets. If you want some alpha on AI, we definitely recommend you check that out because that's where we're getting a lot of our attention these days. So click the link in the show notes. Today's episode is brought to you by Reserve DTFs. Get exposure to the entire crypto market in a single token. And without further ado, welcome to the Milk Road Macro Show. E.B. Tucker, how are you, sir?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
I'm really glad you're here. I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation for our audience because, you know, for as long as you've been a market commentator, you've been non-consensus, but full of different kinds of ideas, insight, wisdom. Something you've been saying a lot recently, which I thought would be a good place to start, is that you believe that capitalism is dead and it's finished and it's winding down as a system. And we're going to move to what you've called a managed economy where the government and central banks have much more control. Tell us about this thesis. Why, in your mind, is capitalism finished and how did we get here?
Well, I mean, it's been done for a long time. I think it took us a while to notice, but like the whole premise of capitalism is buyers and sellers meet in this marketplace and they kind of battle it out, and the consumer wins. And then we had this whole like 1970s and 80s like thing that we believed in as a country, but it's too rough. And people just they can't handle it. I mean, you see now when the market goes down 1% in a day, people are just they're looking for a tall building, and they can't handle the natural kind of like forest fire that used to be part of capitalism. And the beautiful thing about capitalism is that things don't get that out of whack because like nature comes by and sort of like, gives everything a haircut. And, we still experience this on a letter. I mean, the Tucker letter, my newsletter, if it's like, awful, then people aren't going to read it, right? I mean, it's like, so there's this, this natural pressure that like my work has got to be kind of on the bleeding edge. And it's got to be good, and it can't be some 25-year-old writing it. No offense to 25-year-olds, but it's got to be me writing it, and it's got to be, it's something that's a lot of pressure for me. And that's sort of like capitalism. You don't really get a break from that. And so, but as a society, we stopped doing that. And if you notice, like we just have this ever-expanding system that has the occasional like 3-week panic. I mean, we had that this year in April. People were like losing their mind. And then all of a sudden, we just like jump right back into the escalator. So we go up on the escalator, and then we have a brief kind of like correction. And it's a manufactured correction because things get out of control. And so everybody knows that you have to sort of rein them in a little bit. You can't have them growing so much that people lose faith in what they're doing. I mean, everybody in America, like it's say they believe in the system that we have, but nobody like picks their head up for a minute, backs up a little bit, and it's like the thing is bogus, man. I mean, it's like it's not the 100 years ago, is what we learned about in school. We learn about this like 1930s, 40s, 50s capitalism thing, and it's over. It's totally over. And then one more thing I want to kind of say to you about this is that in capitalism, you also like the way you saved was very important to understand. You saved capital, like you worked and you didn't spend as much money as you made, and you saved it, and you had the other part to invest. But you don't have to do that anymore. Like you don't really get paid any money for your capital anymore, and you don't really buy stock in a company that makes money. You buy stock in a company that has infinite growth potential. and then the stock becomes worth huge amounts of money as people realize there's infinite potential. Once it makes, a dollar a share, it's not worth very much. Do you notice that? Like when people that talk about value stocks, this is like the most dead thing you can possibly own, because once you can count the profit, it's not worth much at all. What you need to do is you need to say there's infinite potential with flying robotic taxis. Now, once you actually have flying robotic taxis, then it's valued like a utility company. It's valued quite low, but when you're hoping that you'll eventually have robotic taxis, it's worth tremendous amounts of money. See, this never happened in capitalism. Like in the 50s, you would never have said, like one day we're going to have this vast internet. People would have been like, well, there's no reason, I'm not going to risk my hard-earned money on that because it doesn't make any money. It's a bad investment. See, now we're in this zone where like the bigger the idea is, the crazier the stock can get. And that's what people they have a really hard time understanding this. But believe me, capitalism died. It didn't send you a funeral announcement or obituary. Nobody told you, but we're telling you here.
So, okay, let me try to synthesize this and see if I understand this. So you're saying that capitalism, as it was originally framed, and as most people think of it, is this idea that the economy will, sort out winners and losers. Companies that don't produce will eventually go bankrupt. And now we move to this situation where, like, we're printing all this money to sort of paper over these economic downturns and keep things going longer than they naturally would. And so now that system, that old capitalist system, is no longer relevant. And people are valuing things based on this like rampant speculation on the futures. You're saying, I want to drill down on this other term that you've used, because you've said that what's going to replace this old capitalist system of natural changes in the economy and rollovers of successful companies and unsuccessful ones is this idea of a managed economy. What is a managed economy, and how are we going to make that transition into a managed economy, or have we already made that transition?
We've made the transition. Now, I don't know, don't mistake this for saying that it'll work, because I think eventually this leads to like a humongous mess, but that could be a while. I mean, what people don't understand, like this is where the gold people really get it wrong, is they're like, they just think that there's going to be this moment any day now, like the rapture that's going to come along, and there's just going to be this like big system reset, and they're going to be the smartest people in the room. And it's probably not going to happen. Like, think about it. This system that we've been running on for 25 years, I mean, if you sat out of this system, like, you don't have very much money. Like, I mean, the numbers just get bigger and bigger. And I'll put it to you like this. I have a couple kids running around, and when they're around me, I don't let them have a lemonade stand. You remember, it's like the American thing to do was to have like a lemonade stand. And I'm like, it's totally irrelevant. Like the fact that you can like go to the store and buy the stuff and make the lemonade and sell it is just like, that is the last thing that's going to help you in this system. And what people need to understand is you've got to study history, because in history, what happens is it doesn't feel as personal. And the thing in history that always happened to kings and monarchs and governments was if people got really hungry, they got like really irritated and they started throwing rocks and like trying to, cut the head off the king. And so they figured out that like, we gotta make sure these people are fed. You had this thing in Roman times, bread and circuses. Well, the bread was so that they're fed, and the circus was for entertainment. Well, what do we have today? We have like really cheap food. We have like 24/7 casino style gambling on your phone, right? It's just all people pretty much do is gamble. I mean, if they're not vaping or chewing Zen pouches or gambling, there's nothing else they do, right? I mean, there's just very little other activities outside it. So you have this like sedated, sort of anesthetized populace that is just like freaked out, at any market downturn. And you notice you're like, all they're doing is managing you. And for example, the market's been kind of going down the last 2 months. And what happens is like, it goes down sort of like 2%. And then it comes back like 1.5%. Do you notice this? And then it goes down 2% and back 1.5%. Well, slowly you're going down a little bit, but it's like you're doing it in a way where everybody's just glued to the screen. Do you see how like you're managing people's emotions and feelings and belief? And you have to be very careful with that, because if they stop believing entirely, then they'll stop playing the game. And if they stop playing the the entire system goes to it pancake. Okay, it's done, and that's terrible because you have like this massive economy that you've got to sort of like, it's got to keep moving so that you can have capital gains and payroll tax, and people have to earn a bunch of money and then die and give half of it to the government. See how this goes? So our system is sort of amazing because it has to perpetuate itself. And that's why, like, as soon as people start getting negative about what I'm saying, I'm like, I don't think you understand. It's almost better than capitalism because they literally want you to own stuff that goes up in value, that you sell, you pay capital gains tax, and you spend the money. So once you see that, you're like, it's not really that bad. I mean, to be honest with you, like, sure, maybe someday it's really, really bad, but like that could be a while. I mean, like this could be like a long runway. And I think once you kind of see that, you're like, all I really have to do is sort of like be exposed to the things that are going up. That's it. And it's not that hard because, I mean, you can, this like tomorrow in the Tucker letter, which, be today when this thing comes out, you'll see like we're talking about, there's some really obvious trends, that are happening. And these aren't like, week to week. It's like, let me just give you one, for example. I'm a huge believer that in this managed system, you have these like periodic kind of like freak out situations. Like it's almost hard to remember now that, we had like in 2001, there was like a lot of things going on with the Patriot Act. There's all these kind of like big changes that happened in 2001. And then in 2008, we had this like big, blow up in the financial system with respect to housing and all this stuff. And then, we had periodic things. We had like a flu panic. We had this like 2020 like massive panic where nobody would shake hands and nobody would touch doorknobs and nobody would walk around in the grocery store, unless they followed a certain trail on the ground. Everybody kind of forgot about this. So we have these like periodic things that happen that are societal. They're sort of like a murmuration in the society, and things change. And I really believe that they come in like 7 or 8 year periods. There's another one, right? And I think the next one is going to be like a cyber blackout of epic proportions where all these people, these like Gen Z people that are looking at the phone all the time, I mean, they're going to freak out because what's going to happen is the phone's not going to work. So they're not going to be able to post that the phone's not working. Do you see how it goes? And it's like, what do we do? And so can you imagine what happens when your devices don't work, right? All your wealth is on your device. Like nobody really has any money. Like even there's like a few people with some gold. There's a few people with like $5,000 in cash, maybe $20,000. I mean, if you get more than $20,000 in cash, you can't even get rid of it, right? Because like basically drugs are legal now, so you can't spend it on drugs. And, there's like, you're stuck, right? So nobody really has that much cash anymore. So all the wealth is digital. Blackout. Now, why would this happen? Well, think about the outcome. They say like never waste a crisis. You've heard this kind of like, when it comes to like leadership, like never let a crisis go to waste. Okay. Can you imagine what people would agree to turn the devices back on, right? Like, your Fidelity account scrambled, your Robinhood account's got like Cyrillic writing on it. Like nobody knows what's happening. What would you agree to? Because what we would do is we would say like now the websites have to be like .safe instead of .com, for example. And if it's not .safe, then it's not safe, right? So you have to agree to like this draconian series of things. You remember when you get a new iPhone, you have to like agree to the terms, right? Like imagine nobody reads those terms. So like click here to get your first $100 deposit of FedCoin into your FedCoin wallet, and click here to have access to the .safe domain protocol. Sure, right? So I think people sometimes need to slow down and be like, okay, if that's going to happen, what stocks do you want to own? I mean, I want to own cybersecurity stocks because the reality is that like we're not moving away from digitization. Like, I mean, we're moving to like full digitization. Like literally our identity is digitized, right? So like people are going to need more of that, not less. And then people are like, well, that's not going to be a 50x return. You don't need it to be 50x return. Like the stock market grew at 8% last century, and anybody that had stocks the whole time did great. A lot of these stocks go up like 30% a year right now. And people are like, well, that's not enough. And it's like, not enough for who? I mean, like, 100 grand turns into 130. You see what I mean? Like by year two, you're almost at 200. I mean, like the numbers start going fast. And all they want you to do, John, all they want you to do is to buy the thing and to make money and pay tax and to spend the money. Can you please do that? Like, would you mind? Could I trouble you to like make 30% a year and spend some of the money? Like, is it too much to ask?
ETFs provide investors with a structured, disciplined, and diversified approach to crypto, which is cool, but the world is moving on-chain. We need a crypto-native equivalent. That's exactly what Reserve's decentralized token folios, DTFs, bring to the table. Reserve DTFs are rule-based baskets of crypto assets packaged into a single token, like CoinMarket's CMC20, crypto's version of the S&P 500. Go to milkroad.com/reserve to find out what's on offer.
So this sounds like, there's a lot in that answer, but it sounds like another way of stating that we're in this sort of like everything bubble that's going to keep going, and the institutions that we have are kind of like obligated to keep that going. Something I'm curious to get your thoughts on is this rise of socialism in terms of its popularity in the United States, and how it seems like people who are on the far left and on the far right are coming to be a little bit more aligned with one another than they previously thought. And I think a recent example of that we saw was this meeting with Trump and Zoran, how Zoran's very focused on affordability, and Trump has been, was focused on that as well, and sort of refocused on that in a lot of ways. But both of them are doing different sorts of policies where the government is getting more involved. And you had this idea of this managed economy. How far do you see that trend continuing? Like, is Zoran going to have grocery stores and Trump's going to give everybody $1,000 in the stock market?
Well, sort of like in between those two things. First of all, I was in Dubai last month, and I arrive in Dubai and I get into a taxi, and this little Nepalese guy is driving me in the taxi, and he goes, "You from America?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm from New York." He goes, "You have new president." What? He goes, "Yeah, you have new president. He going to help people." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, he thought Zoran was the president. I'm telling you. So then I get to Italy. I'm at the Rick Owens store buying a shirt. The guy goes, "You got a new president." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And it's crazy to me because I'm like, wow, like everybody thinks Zoran is the president. Now, you got to feel bad for this guy, because what's going to happen is, I mean, you live in New York too. You know what the deal is. It's like the most corrupt place in the world. So this poor guy is like, he's got everybody thinking that like he's not really gonna help. Like what's gonna happen is he's gonna realize like, wow, I mean, if I I don't mean tax like charge a fee. I mean like if I lean too heavy on the system, it's not gonna work. Like the sausage machine not gonna make sausage anymore if I crush it, right? And if I don't crush it, then I'm going to have like this revolt or whatever. And so what's going to happen is that the establishment is going to tell him like the trick is to promise people stuff and then to struggle really hard while you're not doing it. That's the trick. Okay. Like I have a cousin that's a congressman, and it's like this guy's website is like God, family, country. I mean, he's like walking around with a shotgun and stuff. I mean, like, he's not doing anything to help anybody. Come on. Like, it's impossible. It's totally impossible. And so, Atlanta has a government-owned grocery store. It's south of town. You can visit it and you can see what's going on. The fact is that you got to charge a certain price because nobody wants to work there if you don't pay them. And if the groceries are not, if the blueberries don't have a snap when you eat them, people don't want to buy them, So it's just like, it's hard to get away from this stuff. It's really hard to get away from this stuff. And I think it's the Zoran. I think the guy's great, right? It's just like, it's really difficult. He says that violence is an abstraction. If you've been the victim of violence before, it's not an abstraction. Like I had a guy attack me in the Philadelphia subway. My friends from Philadelphia were like, nobody rides the subway. So, it's like, it jars you, it rattles you, okay? And it's like, I'm a kind of an urban person, so I don't really mind that much in the grand scheme of things. But my point is that like when things get unsafe, you don't use them anymore. And so this is so simple, like this exists for us on a personal level, right? I mean, like we're talking about how the system is not a capitalist system, but it is on a personal level. Like I don't go to my subway stop if people are getting shoved in front of the train. I don't do it, So
Sure.
I
So
think
yeah.
I think this guy is gonna realize that like this machine is like unchangeable. Okay. There's a lot of moving parts and it's like really complicated. That's what I think he's gonna realize.
Yeah, and I think that I didn't mean to get political by any means, but I think that the root of these things is economics and economic systems, and so that's what I'm interested to see, like how that plays out and how these ideas continue to develop or take shape in policy. I want to ask your thoughts about the Federal Reserve, because you've talked a lot about how we have all these institutions that sort of paper over these economic problems as opposed to letting them sort of play out naturally and organically sort of heal themselves. The Federal Reserve has announced, or just this week, ended quantitative tightening. A lot of people are speculating that they're going to be forced to begin adding more liquidity into 2026. Trump has all but announced that Kevin Hassett is going to be the next Fed chair, and he has been much more aligned with Trump's policy of lowering interest rates. What do you expect as a policy
Which
path?
might not be true, by the way, because remember,
yeah, I'd love
just
to hear your
really
thoughts on
quick,
this.
remember Trump's thing is that he usually puts out a balloon, and then when everybody smashes the balloon, he's got another balloon, which was really the balloon that he wanted. So
yeah, so we'll see. But so this
Yeah.
is my question, right? Is what is the policy path that you're expecting from the Fed? Do you expect a lot of printing? Do you expect a lot of cutting? What do you think is going to happen?
I don't think so. I think there's a couple of things. One, the balance sheet's back under $7 trillion, which is actually not that big if you really think about it. I got over 9 briefly, then we dialed it back under 7. Nothing really that crazy's happened except for commercial real estate's no good. I got a guy that I accidentally gave a bunch of money to for trailer parks that, is not done the best job. And, like that really gets better only if rates come down for borrowing purposes. Okay. And so now we're still in this zone where like a lot of the action in the market is algorithmic. All the Jane Street and, these Jump and all these guys, Citadel, like they're making a fortune because if the market moves, they're just like all over it, kind of like shaving it down here, then back up here, and it's like, so we live in this odd time where like more or less liquidity really matters. But I want you to think about something. The whole premise of the Fed, the whole design of the Fed after the San Francisco earthquake, 120 years ago roughly, was that we needed to have this like methodology of kind of like running floodgates on liquidity. That was like the whole thing. And so you've got this really interesting thing going on called stablecoins. And you start thinking to yourself, like, the banks that own the New York Fed, all right, so the New York Fed has all the power, right? I mean, you have like a dozen banks, but like the New York Fed is the only one that has any power. And so the banks that own the New York Fed, they're like shareholders of this, and their responsibility is to buy treasuries as primary dealers, and that's part of their arrangement. And you can read books about this; it really doesn't matter. But I think the Fed, I think what's going to happen is that you notice like when Epstein did his thing, nobody cared. By the way, like I wrote about this in like 2011 because it was happening in Florida. There was all these trials and stuff. Nobody knew who this guy was. He was an intelligence agent. Nobody cared. All of a sudden, like 14 years later, people are like really concerned about this situation, which was completely reported in the South Florida newspapers and never happened. All right. So my point is, it becomes an issue when it becomes an issue. Imagine this. Imagine that we like do this investigate the Fed thing and it like riles people up and they're like, yeah, finally get these Fed people, like barbecue all these people, for the people. And we crush the Fed and then we reintroduce a new version, which needs to have the stable coin operators. Because if you think about it, if you have like trillions of dollars that's moving around in the stable coin market, that's becoming a huge part of the liquidity matrix. Like the banks aren't really doing that much anymore. I mean, they have the KYC stuff dialed down to where if you go into the JP Morgan in New York with $1,000, they're like, are you a terrorist? And you're like, believe me, I'm not, I just have some weekend money. They don't believe you. So my point is like, you're now getting into this zone where stable coins are a factor. They need to be at the table because if you need to move things around, you need to do it with stable coins, right? You can't have people like bypassing the system and going this other way. And so 5 years from now, maybe 10 years from now, maybe 5 months from now, I don't know. I think you could have this scenario where you barbecue the Fed and you do it in a way to make people feel like you're helping, right? Because imagine, like, a lot of times they'll do something that's like, we're going to really get to the bottom of this, but it's already finished. Like, the time to barbecue the Fed would have been like in the 70s. You know what I mean? Like that was like a time when, when they pulled off the exchange standard for gold. Like, I mean, that was when you should have like really crucified all those people, but you didn't. You waited like what, 50, 60 years to have this kind of like, call them up to the stand to like really get on them. And so I think when people start thinking about, are they going to cut rates next week? It really doesn't matter, because eventually when there's enough problems, they have to ease up on the liquidity. That's the trick here. Okay. So like, there's a lot of people that are having problems right now, like leveraged people, but they're not important people. When Apollo has a problem, when BlackRock has a problem, when Blackstone has a problem, when, Blue Owl has a problem, when some of these like really connected firms start having a problem, like they can't get rid of this thing, and they have like pension funds suing them because they're like, you told us we'd be liquid 5 years ago and you're not liquid. That's when you're going to see the next, whatever the thing is. It's not going to be quantitative easing. It's never the same thing. Do you notice that? It's always something new. And so like eventually where you're going to end up is with FedCoin, and everybody's going to have a FedCoin wallet on their phone. And that's not going to be a crypto you can speculate on. That's going to be a closed loop quantum machine that's housed like somewhere that the Fed controls, and it's going to have the serial number of every Fed coin in existence. And I'm going to know exactly what you did last weekend, where you did it, right? And I'm going to be able, with AI, by the way, like they already know if you're sick before you're sick, right? I mean, like, they're going to know everything. And so when you start really thinking about that, you're like, this is 2025 is a pretty good time to be alive. Because I mean, like, it ain't going to get better. I'll tell you that.
Well, I think it's going to get different. And, I definitely hear what you're saying. Stablecoins as a tool for monetary surveillance and economic control, and let's just say supervision, right, is one of the most like revolutionary pieces of financial technology that's come out. I'm interested to see what that development looks like, because I think, like any technology, it's sort of agnostic. It depends on how you use it, and how you use it makes all the difference. I do want to pivot this conversation towards the future, because something else I really appreciate about your work, you do a lot of in-depth analysis on niche things that are sort of like ahead of what people think is ahead of the curve. So I want to go into AI and then also like other things that you're looking at. Just today, this afternoon, President Trump and Secretary of Commerce Lutnick said that after the focus on AI, they want to focus on robotics and embodied AI. And I'm curious your thoughts on how you see AI and robotics fitting into this like transition into this future economy state we're going towards. What are your thoughts on these pieces of technology right now? What are you most interested in and excited by?
Well, first of all, I don't think most people have fully experimented with, having an AI agent interact with them. What I would suggest is that get into a long conversation with it. I mean, my readers know that I'm pretty into human design right now. I mean, I also feel free to get into something and then a year later be into something totally different, just to be clear. But I think human design is like one of the most fascinating things I've ever learned about. And ChatGPT helped me learn about it because it's a really complicated subject. And so you can get your human design chart, load it into GPT, and have like a long conversation. When I say long, I mean like I've uploaded all my book drafts in there, and like, hundreds of issues of the newsletter, and like massive conversations. And I've had no holes barred discussion with it. And so what happens is it really maps your personality. And then you could say, I got to go try on a pair of pants or something. Take a picture in the dressing room. Do they fit properly? And this thing can look at the pair of pants and say like, well, the hem is no good. It needs a 2-inch lower rise or something, whatever. It's crazy. And so my point is that like, I think people need to explore that because they need to understand what's happening, the pattern recognition, the sequencing of information, the predictive ability of this. Now, this is not consciousness, Okay, this is different from consciousness. If you really get into studying consciousness, it's this very fascinating thing that we have as humans. It's like the sum of our experience plus this like unique biological sensation that we have when we're walking around. Like when Zoran says violence is an abstraction. Well, when we walk around a corner and like something's about to happen, we can feel it like in our bones. And it's because we have like trillions of nerve endings that are like sensing energy. It's very, very interesting. And now's the time to learn about that, to think about that in the context of what's happening with machines. And when you do this, what happens is something very scary. You start noticing that most of the people that are around are not going to be necessary. And these are the people that have like, Candy Crush on their phone and like a vanilla vape in one hand, and their mouth is open, right? Like they're kind of staring off into the abyss, and they're concerned about like, their medical insurance or like their car payment or something. I mean, like the scope of their thinking is very short. Okay. And you start thinking to yourself, this person's doomed. And I think everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. Now, who's not doomed? Now, the Tucker kids, in addition to not being allowed to conduct lemonade stand activities, the Tucker kids are on this like strict regimen of chess and tennis at the moment. But what's happening is to these kids is that I'm encouraging them into humanities. If they have an ability for math, maybe we do math, but no STEM learning. We're not doing math like for the traditional sense. We're doing math to become an option trader, okay? To become an algorithmic trading programmer, okay? To be able to have public speaking skills. We don't own a television. Both my houses, no television, no iPads, none of this traditional media. The reason why is because the people that are going to make it, John, the people that are going to be successful in 20 years are going to be the people that have the ability to relate to other humans and have a humanities background. That means philosophy. Chess is like three-dimensional thinking. Tennis is like chess, but with a racket in your hand, and it's exercise. So these are the types of things that I think are very important. And when people hear me say those things, I think they should not think about that as some activity that I have the leisure of participating in. I think they should think, why is this guy doing this with his children? Like what you teach your children is like the most influential thing pretty much you can do, as a person, like throughout your life. And so what I'm trying to do is to give them the skeletal resources necessary to be able to live in this world, which is going to not require data entry and, coding. Coding is useless. I mean, you can just ask ChatGPT to code something for you. It's crazy. So anyway, one last thing on this. I write the Tucker letter. I literally type the Tucker letter, okay? And I'll ask ChatGPT what it thinks about my story, right? And the bot understands that the reason I write the Tucker letter is because I'm an artist. And the artist for 100 years got used to making art to make money. And so the thing is now is that I think people need to understand the reason I write the Tucker letter is so that my head doesn't explode, okay? And if you're an artist, if you are into something, you need to do that something because of what that something means to your unique body, okay? Once you do that, you are in a different realm from advanced intelligence, okay? And it's really important that you find that thing because that is the thing that makes being human interesting. And then you're using the technology for your advantage, and you're not trapped in this game that you can't see. And if that's a lot, just rewind the interview and listen one more time, because I'm telling you, I really, really believe that this is the most important thing that you need to understand right now. And if you get with that, I think the next 10 years are going to be amazing. And if you don't get with that, I think you're going to be totally bamboozled.
I think it's really gets to, well, what you're saying here, I think speaks to how people need to think about what is value and what is economic activity and what is purpose and how to have purpose and meaning in their life outside of dollars and cents on a computer screen. And so I think that's a helpful perspective there. Something you have written about by hand in one of your recent Tucker letters was about, and you might have to correct me on some of the details on this, but like vertical takeoff aircraft and sky taxis. This is something that I think a lot of people haven't really thought much about yet in terms of like becoming a real thing. People are still talking about self-driving cars, but I'd really like to hear your thoughts on this. What are you seeing that's got you excited about this? Is this something investors should pay attention to? And like, what's the potential future looking like there from your perspective?
First, I thought it was a joke. When I first heard about it, I thought it was like the goofiest thing I'd ever heard. Then I started investigating the company, one of the leading company. There's a couple of companies, and I started realizing, whoa, this is actually like pretty serious. Then I met a guy in New York that advises one of the companies, and he hooked me up at the Dubai Air Show, and I went to see the plane myself. And it slowly occurred to me that this is going to be a critical form of people moving activity, especially in major cities. And people should understand that what happens with these planes is that they take off, vertical, the propellers point down, they go up, and the propellers go forward, and they go forward. And the premise is
is this mass transit? Is this mass transit or individual transportation?
This is going to be like 4 people in the 4 passengers. You'll book this from your Uber app or Lyft. You'll maybe the Delta website claims that it's going to be one of the portals. And so what will happen is that you'll pay some fairly modest amount of money. Let's say it's like $200 to go 50 miles or something. And you'll go down to a skyport and you'll get in this thing. There's a pilot in it, okay? And it'll take off and go, and it'll drop you at the place, and it's pretty much silent. And 90% of the power is used in takeoff and landing. So flying forward uses almost no power. And when it lands, it has kind of like your iPhone charges, when you put it on that docking station, is it sort of like gets itself, a 10% recharge during the passenger on-off loading. So the thing can run all day. And it's really crazy. I sat in the thing at the Dubai Air Show. I didn't fly in it. They didn't offer that, but they did fly it. I did watch the thing fly and do transitions. And I think people need to realize that this is coming like now. UAE is going to have skyports, they say, next year, with limited mobility. New York's going to have them. One of the companies bought Blade Helicopter, so they would already have a place to put all the skyports. And, there's a couple of companies. We own, 2 of them in the newsletter. The founder, there's a founder level Tucker letter. We bought some warrant exposure in one of the small companies. I think there's going to be some losers in the industry, but what's going to happen is that someone's going to emerge as being the sort of the dominant, PR. The PR ability is really important. When you show this video, I showed the video of the Dubai Air Show to people. Not one person I showed it to believed it was real. They were like, "There's no way that plane's doing that." It's definitely doing that. It's doing it right now. They're going to make like thousands of these planes per year, thousands. And so you're going to have skyports all over major cities flying point A to point B. And, places like if you went from Miami to Fort Lauderdale or something like that, you're definitely going to do that in this plane because it's too difficult to drive and the train is not always practical.
Tucker, I could ask you 1,000 questions about this. We're coming up on time here. I think what I'd like the audience to take away from this, though, is just how much research Tucker puts into things, how much education he has accumulated, and how he focuses on education and sort of like re-equipping himself for the changing environment, society, economy that we're in. That's the big point of this show, is to try to give people just a broadened perspective. It's called Milk Road Macro, but to just keep bringing in new perspectives, new ideas. Tucker, I want to end with this because I think a lot of investors are kind of struggling with this question right now, which is around how do you construct a portfolio in this environment? Because, like you said, the institutions kind of have set things up to have everybody buy the same index of the same companies and just let that get pumped up by, the debasement of the currency. You, I think, are an interesting investor because you're doing investments in these sort of like niche cutting edge technologies, but you also have silver on your desk and gold on your desk, which is like the most ancient analog investment technology there is. How are you thinking about building a portfolio? And how would you tell people to think about that at this kind of strange time in the market that we're in?
Well, we have one at the Tucker letter. We have a portfolio, and we sort of like go to great lengths to explain to people what we're doing, because the reality is that you should read the Tucker letter because I write so that you can read, and you read, and I can write. It's a two-way relationship. And, as you learn, you realize that you massively expand your ability to see things when you learn, and you should, not get a newsletter to like have a secret stock pick at the end, because this is a distance race. This is a marathon. I mean, this is not like some magical thing that's happening. And we've done great in the portfolio, and I'm constantly trying to calm people down about the portfolio, because I mean, we're not actively trading. We'll find something like flying taxis or cybersecurity or precious metal. I mean, I wrote a book about gold when gold was like $1,200. I mean, it's like people sort of forget about it. I'm not that interested in gold now. I do like
why gold? Why now? Why gold? Why now? If anybody hasn't read that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great book. It's super easy to read. I mean, it's written for kind of like, anybody with no experience can understand that book. And what people need to understand is I wrote that when gold wasn't that popular. And, I think there's a place for gold in the portfolio. If you read the newsletter that came out today, I talk about why it's important to have some gold now. It's also important to have some Bitcoin now. And the people that are not buying Bitcoin, they're buying like, altcoins and miners. I just don't think they get it. It's kind of like in gold. Like if you just bought the gold, if you just put 5% of your portfolio in gold or something, like when I wrote the book, you did great. I mean, you were up 60% this year. But if you bought like, strange mining stocks or something, or like call options, and like, you just kind of gambled with it, you didn't really catch it. Like you don't really understand. You did a lot of work and you really didn't make money. And so I think what people need to realize is that like what I'm doing, I do this on behalf of a trust, is like I'm telling you the trade 24 hours before we make it. And it's not like these are like obscure things that we're buying. I mean, they have like good liquidity, and it's like these are like somewhat larger things. But what we're trying to do is to run one of these like quadruple marathons. That's what we're trying to do. We want to run like this huge, like 4X marathon where we don't die during that process. I mean, we're not sprinting, we're not pole vaulting, we're not doing any of that stuff. You shot out of a cannon. We're not doing that. Like if you can make, like superior returns, like market, superior returns for like years and years and years and years, you're going to do fine. You're going to do fine. And then it's like, what are you going to do after you're going to do fine? Well, you need to figure out how to live. And a lot of people just don't know how to live because they've been trapped in this kind of like society that we've created where they've spent zero time sort of like figuring out how to like live as a human. So like we could solve the money things pretty easy, so then we got to solve the thinking thing, and we got to solve the living thing. And like, that's what we do. We do that 26 times a year at the Tucker Letter. I mean, it's like, it should be fun to read, like I read a postscript after the signature. That's people's favorite part. It's nothing to do with the markets. Like I'm going to see Parmesan cheese made in today's essay in the postscript. It's really interesting. There's only 3 ingredients. Like I never really knew this. So basically, it's like I went to the facility, had a full tour, there's pictures, videos, everything. So my point is that like, this is how you should see your human experience. Like get out of this like, race for like magical lottery ticket gains. So you're not even gonna know how to spend them. Like most of the people I know that think like that, they'd have no idea what to do when they actually make money. And a lot of like compulsive corporate executives that like backstab all their friends and like don't know their family and sort of like live for this big payoff, they finally get it and they have like no knees and hips and no hobbies and like they're just dead. So like this is your only time you're going to go around, on this rock, man. This is it, right? So like, let's live. Like let's live the full human experience with the ups and downs, with the bumps in the road, with the good times, with the heartache. Like let's live the whole thing. And what you find is a paradox. Like is that as soon as you start doing that, you actually do make more money. You actually do have more fun. Like it's this whole kind of like philosophical trick, if that makes sense. So like come over to ebtucker.com, read today's letter. It's pretty cool. You read it for free, and join us for a while.
Get out of the rat race and get into your life. Tucker, I really appreciate you coming in here.
You can always go back. Yeah.
Yeah, if it's more fun, you can always go back.
Yeah.
EB, I really appreciate the conversation. Like I said, you've been non-consensus for a long time, but I think that there's so much that people can learn from you and from your thinking as a result of the fact that you don't follow the herd. So, really appreciate you coming on Milk Road Macro and sharing a lot of these ideas with us today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for joining us. I hope you learned something today. So until next time, stay safe, stay educated, stay bullish, and we will see you all on the next episode of Milk Road Macro. Thanks for being here, everyone. Bye. Want insights on what's really moving markets and how we're trading each event? Subscribe to our channel, then join the Milk Road Macro and Macro Pro newsletters. This show is for educational purposes only. Nothing we say is financial advice. Investing is risky. Never invest more than you can afford to lose.